Carson, Leno, Fallon. Now, it's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Doug Frost. Introductions, easy for you to say in just a moment. Hey, have a listen to Daniel Isis. Actually, it's backwards. Isis Daniel. And so she comments on having a name like Isis through her adolescence. But Isis Daniel, she is the millennial somm. She's on her way to Paris to study for the WSET diploma accolade, and she is fascinating conversation, particularly when it comes to the subjects of women in wine and BIPOC, or people of color in our industry, which is a big subject. So have a listen to that. But now while we're here today, we are here to have a conversation with, I don't know, one of four people in the country, Doug?
Actually, what's kind of sad is there were four of us, but the person who passed after me, in other words, the third person, a wonderful guy named Gerard Basset, he passed away a few years ago. So now there's just three of us in the world, one guy in Florida, me in Kansas City, where that happens, and then one guy in Hungary, for God's sakes.
And I'm referring to, for the listeners, people that have a Master of Wine, which is a extraordinarily difficult credential or diploma out of London, and a Master Sommelier, which is from the Court of Sommeliers. These are two of the highest accolades in our industry, and to have both, it's kind of nuts, really. So what? Which one did you get first?
Well, I finished the MS first, but I actually was taking them both at the same time, which was not the plan. I didn't have a plan.
Right, of course.
Again, I live in Kansas City. I didn't have a plan. I was like, ooh, this is cool. We're drinking and reading, my two favorite things, And so I basically took them both at the same time. I finished the MS in 91, and I finished the MW in 93.
So you said something interesting just then. You sit around Kansas City, it's not exactly the hotbed of wine in the country, but, it's probably growing now, but, it's about barbecues there. And were you an academic kid?
Yeah, I think I was, even though I didn't do anything other than get a bachelor's. But yeah, I always really, really dug academia. So it was easy for me and fun for me to stick my head in a book. I remember when I was done with both of the programs, I still couldn't stop studying. It was like, no, this is manna to me. This is what I like. So yeah, I think I was, a geek, always a geeky kid.
My mother passed away a few years ago, but she would be completely flabbergasted that I have my head in a book these days, and that I now am pursuing knowledge of this industry and parts of it. But it's more of a curiosity around the historical aspects of the different regions, to understand, why we're here at the day we are with the wines that are there. And it's just sort of an interesting, it's really like history. And that certainly raises the appreciation of what you have in the glass, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. I think for me, I certainly have always enjoyed and must admit that I got it into the MS and the MW programs because I wanted to teach more and I wanted to write more. And in teaching or writing, either one, the whole idea is give somebody context. So it's not this exists, therefore it's great. That's of no use to anybody.
Right.
This exists because of these other things. And if you like this, maybe these other things will intrigue you as well. It's creating context helps us understand why things are the way they are, and maybe figure out where they're going to go next.
We're going to talk about that, because I'm not sure that one's a tougher one. But the Master Sommelier, since it was 1991, and I had Emmanuel Comigi in here. He's a really good friend of mine.
Yeah, Manny's
I
great.
think he passed it in 96. But one of the comments he made a couple of times was, there was less to learn then. And South America was sort of happening, and certainly had to learn Burgundy, Bordeaux, and Spain, and Ribera de Duero, et cetera. But is it changed for you? Have you seen this radical change in the volume of information needed to do this?
Yeah, it absolutely. There's no question about that. Manny's right. And, the breadth of information that you're supposed to have command of now is far greater, really. On the other hand, I would certainly say that because there's such breadth now, that the depth of knowledge that you had to have about the classic regions was it was unforgivable if you didn't have that. Whereas today, okay, maybe you don't have every single Premier Cru off the top of your head. You're probably going to get through the exam anyway if you know most of them or can recognize them. But on the other hand, if you have zero information about Australia or whatever, then you're probably going to be in trouble. I still remember, I have to say, that the Master Sommelier exam, it's a verbal exam. And my final exam, I'm going through the questions, and you're not really counting the questions off, but you can kind of tell when you're getting near the end of the questions. And I remember thinking, we haven't even gotten to a question about Australia yet. And I thought that was really weird because I'd studied my ass off on Australia, right? And so I can tell it's one of the last questions when the question is, name one winery in 3 different states in Australia. And I looked at the examiners because I thought I was about to say, yeah, I got it. This is all you're going to ask me? F you in the state of F you in the state of F. It was like, Are you kidding me? This is it. And that was it. That was the only Australian
question. That was the only question.
I was ready for soil types. I was ready for, clones. I was ready for everything. But that's the nature of the MS question is it's very randomized and you don't really know what's coming at you. And some of the questions are going to kick your butt. And some of the questions are going to be like, you got to be kidding me. Seriously? That's all you want. Well, so that's just the way it works.
Your fellow Master Soms would be very disappointed in that since they now have embarked on an Australian import business. I made a note to talk about that in a minute because it's so different than it was when things were around. In fact, the question I asked them, I said, would it surprise you if I told you in 1998 or something around there, maybe a little earlier, that I split a full container, 40-foot container of wine with Trader Joe's, and it was 375s of a late harvest Semillon from Penfolds? Would that surprise you? They're like, yeah, hell yeah, that would surprise us. Who does that? But, both of us sold it all. But anyway, so the Master Somm, and I remember at least the conversations I've had with Manny and a couple others, the Master Somm is a little larger net when it comes to beverages, service, hospitality, and the rest of what we do in this industry. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I often kind of joke with people that when they're trying to figure out what's the difference between the Master Sommelier and the Master of Wine, I'm like, well, the Master Sommelier is a billion miles wide, but only about 5 inches deep. And the Master of Wine is really, not that wide, but a billion miles deep. So you really have to know more about each of the subjects in the MW. But I certainly remember a friend of mine who passed the MW the same time I did, Peter Koff, a South African Master of Wine, who said, I tell you what, Doug, I am now a Master of Wine, and I don't know the single vineyard names of Valtellina Superiore, and I don't give a damn if I ever know them. It's like, yeah, you're right. You couldn't pass the MS without that stuff, but the MW, you don't need to know that, but you do need to know, vine diseases and how you're supposed to treat them, and yada yada yada.
He's a very good friend.
Peter's great people.
He's a very good friend, but he'll also tell you that he was sort of walked into it. He says, I don't think I even took the test. He goes, because I was a South African expert and I had earned that credential down there and I think it was 1991 or 3, right? You said?
Yeah. He passed in 93 with me. Yeah.
Yeah. He sort of sounded like, I'm not even sure, what happened, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
He was well prepared, but he was a Cape Master, which is a different program, not to the same degree of the MW, but it's an exacting program. So he had gone through that, and we both had to. It took both of us a couple of tries to get through there. So it's like
it's interesting. He's been doing. He had Ferris Cape, wholesale house, and we did a lot of business together in the early days. I don't think he's doing much of it now, but and he actually ended up getting Italian wines. I think one of the ones I was going to buy was a Montepulciano. Anyway, he now is doing some video series with Pat Farrell.
Oh, really? Cool.
and an Asian group. And so I see them, they sit around a room outside and they taste wine and they talk about it. And, but I can't read the post because they're all in Chinese. So,
that's rough.
and-
Yeah.
and he,
Well,
he always asked, he was always leaning on me, so to speak, to help him understand the DTC world, which
yeah,
was, I never understood it. It was 35 years worth.
that's
So
right.
he was trying to leverage away. And I think this Chinese group that he hooked up with has helped that regard for him. But I don't think he's wholesaling much anymore.
I honestly don't know,
I don't think
and I haven't seen Peter in a good year and a half or so, and I haven't seen Pat Farrell in probably pre-pandemic. The good doctor, Farrell.
Yeah.
It's disappointing because we don't get together the way we used to. Back in the early days, all the MWs would get together once a year for the basically what they call the seminars, the residential seminars, and we'd see everybody and we'd party like lords and have a great time and teach, and that just doesn't happen anymore.
He and I were doing business together. We were attempting to. He actually had a product that I thought was really, really effective. It was called the Bev Wizard. Do you remember this?
Oh,
You
I
heard of it?
remember the Bev Wizard. Sure,
This
yeah,
is
yeah.
opposing magnets in this spout, and it worked as long as there was tannic acid, or at least acid from barrel fermentation or whatever barrels are providing. It would smooth it out. And I took this thing to the local bar here, and it was they poured Barton's crap scotch this place,
Right, yeah.
and I blinded all three bartenders with a pour through the spout and one without it, and hands down, through the spout was smoother and easier. You actually turned a whiskey into something palatable. And then I took it down to Laguna Beach because my wife's uncle was the inventor of the spoon straw and the flexi straw. And
Sure, yeah.
he's passed since, but he was a MIT master's in mechanical engineering, brilliant guy. And I said, I've got this product, and I was trying to work with Patrick on marketing it and buying into it. I wanted to buy into it, and I'll tell you why it didn't happen. But so I go down to Laguna Beach and I take Art, and we're sitting at the bar, and there's a patron across the way. I go, hey, you want to taste some Jack Daniels? They're like, yeah, sure. I go, come over. I did it 4 times in 4 different bars. Every one of them chose what it was poured through Patrick's product over the stock. And Patrick said, I can't tell you why it does this. He says it would cost me $100,000 to get it tested, so I don't bother. And the reason I didn't buy into it is because the patent wasn't around the process. It was around the device itself, which was really ugly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it came out about when the Venturi came out, and the Venturi is a sleek, glossy box.
Venturi's, yeah,
right?
fancy looking. Yeah, it
It's
looks
a
really
lucite. Anyway,
yeah.
so let's move to the Master of Wine. More academic, London-based. I forgot how old it is. I know Michael Broadbent, my good friend Bartholomew, his father was one.
Yes. Yeah.
What motivated that simultaneous with the Master Somm?
The truth is I didn't even know what the Master Sommelier exam was when I was involved in the MW, and then I became the general sales manager for a statewide company, a wholesale company in Missouri, and walked away from the MW, and then it disappeared from the U.S. and then it came back, and so Joel Butler and Tim Hanai passed, and that shows up in the Spectator. I'm like, hey, I got my job back under control. I'm going to do this again. So I reach out, and I take the first exam, and it's actually a funny story because it was in the tasting exam was in San Francisco, and all I had to do was write this essay, and they said, "Yeah, okay, you're allowed into the program. You're now going to come to San Francisco for a tasting exam." And I thought, I just wrote this essay. Can't there's going to be a couple of hundred people taking this tasting exam, right? So I go to this hotel where the tasting exam is, and I'm looking for a big, ballroom where everybody's at. I can't find it, and then I find this little tiny, conference room, and I look at it, and there's a waiter standing there. I said, "Is this where the Master of Wine tasting exam is?" And he said, "Yeah, the wines are right under that table if you want to look at them." And and what I can tell you is we have proof that I did not look. Those are the results of my exam.
That's really funny.
Proof that I did not look.
What an honorable guy. And,
yeah, exactly. So, so I take that exam, I blow the tasting exam, and they say, well, we're going to start this thing called the residential seminar in 6 months. You should come out to California, and you can do that. And then if you pass that, then you can take the final exam. And so I planned to do that. And then out of the clear blue, like a month later, a friend of mine says, hey, come up to Chicago. You can take this Master Sommelier exam. I'm like, what's that? And he's like, well, it's in 2 weeks. And it wasn't the Master Sommelier exam. It was the advanced exam.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that sounds like a good warm up. I had no idea what I was in.
So funny.
I passed, but I'm sure I passed by the skin of my teeth. And at that point, they were like, hey, dude, you should take the master's in 6 months. I'm like, I just discovered this goddamn thing. I don't know what I'm doing.
That is hilarious.
No, you're actually better off than you think you are. Come along. And so I just sort of fell into both of them. But I really felt like with the Master Sommelier, the same with the MW, but the MS, I kind of looked around the room and went, these are my people. I've been in the restaurant business since I was 14 years old, washing dishes. These are my people. I want to be part of this group.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's really fascinating. And that, they just showed up. And then now had you looked at the bottles and you answered the question in San Francisco and you said, yeah, this is a Cabernet. It's from Oak Knoll. It's a 2000 and whatever vintage was going on then. It's going to be exported by this brand. It's got this much alcohol. And you read off everything that's on the back label, then it probably would have
been a disaster the next time go round. Yeah,
that's a little of a problem there. So do I see the diploma WSET diploma on your horizon?
No, the WSET used to be a requisite for the MW.
Yeah.
Well, it actually still is. I'd have to say most everybody who does the MW has to do WSET first. So, and I really do tell people that it's like, dude, if you're going to try to carve out the MW, you better do WSET first. It's a fantastic way to get ready.
Let's go to the motivation of all this. Besides, you didn't know, you sort of serendipitous approach to this SOM test, but the Master of Wine was thought through. But, back in those days, you got a Master Somm, you had a 6-digit job in Vegas, curating some giant restaurants list. Was it academic? Was it career boosting for you to try? Is that what you were looking for? Was it a lifestyle that maybe you thought you were going to acquire by getting these degrees? I mean, you don't just take tests like that for fun. I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It was early days though. And I was the second person. Ron Wiegand finished before me, 2 years before me. So I was the second person to get both. And honestly, nobody even knew what they were then. It was still pretty early days. So I half jokingly tell people when they say, oh, did you get a lot of job offers? I'm like, actually, I had one job offer that was on the table when I finished the MW and I'd already finished the MS. And that guy literally said, I hope you don't think that now you're an MW, we're going to boost the offer. The offer stands as it is. And I was like,
wow,
you're good. No, then I'm staying where I'm at. No, it really was, I had hope, and it did allow me to do a lot more writing. And that was really the goal. I literally was being treated by, in general, I was being treated by the, sort of the world of wine publications as, who the hell are you? You live where?
Yeah.
And once I got MSMW, all of a sudden it was like, oh, we'd love you to write an article for us. And that was the goal. And then of course, one thing led to another, and I went out on my own within a few years. But the truth of that is that but I would say at least half my income going back 25, 30 years ago when I finished both exams has been derived from spirits and cocktails. From that whole world, there's more money there really. And I've been involved in that world since I was a kid as well. So the wine side of things certainly paid some of the bills, but I was able to go off on my own, I would say more primarily due to being able to do teaching and create educational programs for distillers and wholesalers who wanted people to learn about spirits and cocktails as much.
Seems to be the sign of the times. I mean, wine sales are slumping. They're pulling vines out all over the world because there's not enough buyers. We'll talk about the generation gap when it comes to wine and appreciation. But on the spirit side, you were talking about hospitality. It sounds like you're in the restaurant business most of your career.
Yeah.
One of the great restaurants in Pasadena, California here was the Raymond. And we had dinner with the owners a few months ago. And she's like, yeah, we're selling and we're going to work our RTD cocktails. And so they got out of the hospitality, that daily grind. And she's, I'm not sure she does have a daily grind now because that industry's, pretty slammed.
Yeah.
But what is that movement about? Do you know?
Well, I think that there is just an inevitable evolution to how people view what's cool and what's not. And so, there's no question that boomers really adopted wine. And so in my view, there's no question that Gen Xers were like, hey, if you think wine is cool, then I can't. And so they kind of let it go by. And then we saw millennials sort of come back to it. But I think that what has happened is that we had a good 25-year run when wine either increased in volume or it certainly increased in value. That's to say, people were willing to spend more and more money, and that's over. I think that the day that began its inevitable, in my view, decline was the 2008. The Great Recession started to really challenge people as to how much money are you willing to pay for a glass of wine when you can buy a world-class beer for less money than a glass of decent wine, that you can buy a really great cocktail anywhere, and you'll pay about the same as you do for a moderately priced glass of wine. And now we have new beverages. Now we have a whole, certainly a whole movement among Gen Zers of not drinking at all, of doing cannabis instead of alcohol. There's just so many other choices that I think it was inevitable that at some point things started going the other way. But I feel like as an old person, I feel like, yeah, everything's cyclical. It's okay. I started a winery in 2017, one, because I'm stupid, but
well,
two,
we're going to get to that part too.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm incredibly stupid, but two, because I really do think that there's always going to be room for good wine. And that's what moved me anyway. I wanted to participate in that. I've participated in some winemaking projects in the past, but to have really complete control was a brand new thing for me. And to be able to do it in a fashion after what I wanted to do, that would be really cool. I have participated in distillation projects as well, but it doesn't sing to me the same way that wine does. I felt like I really, really get to do something that if not moves me, that's maybe a little strong, but it's really not strong. It feels right. I feel like I'm getting to do something. And now if we can figure out how to steward the land appropriately, and that's really the struggle now. We own about 400 acres. Is how are we stewarding this land? I feel like that's a good thing to do as well. And if I was just sitting in a little distillation operation somewhere in downtown Kansas City, I don't think it would move me the same way.
That's a volume of what you just said, and it's so important. I mean, you touching on the steward. How much under vine is this?
We only have about 27 acres under vine.
Okay. So I have this romantic notion about wine, and I didn't walk into the wine business with this romance. I walked into it because it was a business. It's my father's business.
Yeah.
The South African Wine of the Month Club in 1988 tendered an unsolicited offer, and I was at corporate America, and he says, if you want this thing or you want to participate, and you can't see behind me, but there's a picture. Let's see, where's my finger? There it is. 1975. You can see me.
Oh, cool.
That was my father.
Oh, no way, that's you.
Yeah. So we're standing at the first Wine of the Month Club display in a wine shop in Palos Verdes. But
right on.
I wasn't passionate for me, but I had this romantic notion with wine that all generations eventually, when they have that glass of wine, and I hate the aha moment conversation, I don't want to have that, but it's that when they recognize a properly, and I'm going to call them honest wine now, a humble wine that's not doctored up and it's not Cali Red from Snoop Dogg, that they get it, and so it's a beverage of the ages, and it's why it's been around for 10,000 years, and it's still here. And yes, it's going to be susceptible to generational changes, but I don't think it ever really goes away in a huge fashion. It just, and so right now it seems like packaging is sort of the nuance. And I suppose when George Clooney sells his tequila for $1 billion, that excites people to do something similar. So now I'm seeing a lot of brands coming out that are canned, smaller versions, 375s, 187s. And instead of what's in the bottle or the can being important, it's the packaging. And that's just going to fly by. I mean,
yeah, I have to agree with you, even though it is important. And there's no question. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody today who has a paper bottle that, they're promoting, and he's like, you need to get on board. You should check this out. It's not for great wine, but it's for decent wine. And it obviously the carbon footprint is much lighter, and there's a lot of reasons to do it. There's a lot of reasons to look at these alternative packages. And I will continue to think that through, but I'm trying to make wines that age, that you're going to stick in the basement and you're going to hang on to them for 5 to 10 years or whatever. And then hopefully you draw it out and you go, wow, this is not just still good. It's better than it was. It's more interesting than it was. And you can't do that in a paper bottle. You can't do that in a bag and box. You can't do that, in a can. So if I'm trying to be in the beverage business, the just plain old beverage lowercase b business, then fine. Whatever packaging appeals to younger consumers is probably where I should be putting my head. But I've decided that I don't want to grow so big. I mean, our winery will its capacity maxes out at 10,000 cases, which is to me sort of the sweet spot. If you go above 10,000, you're trying to be all things to everybody. If you're below 10,000, you can kind of just do what you think you're supposed to do it well, and you should be okay.
So that's the part that bothers me. And I entertain these conversations. I want to hear what they're thinking, but they have no passion for the product. They have passion to hopefully develop the product, put it on the shelf, steal some shelf space from some big brand, and have Constellation come buy you because they're pissed off you taking their space. And that's not... that's not the wine.
You just described the life cycle of 98% of the product out there.
Exactly. And so, this carbon footprint thing too, I say it bothers me. I understand it. I agree. Environmentally, we have responsibility, and certainly the comment you make of stewarding the land is a very important one. And I think most winemakers throughout the world, as you studied, would tell you that you're just passing through this, and it's the next generations after you that we're going to reap the benefits that you do, and then the ones after them are going to reap their benefits. That's just the way the industry is. But I had a conversation with a Cornell food professor, lack of a better word. He is a consultant for canned wines, and his job is to maximize the value of that food grade lining that goes in the cans. And he was telling me that, right now it's looking like 6 months. Now I think I got it from Peter. I think I did get it from Peter. About 15 years ago, I got a Merlot in a 500 ml from South Africa. I'm pretty sure Peter gave it to me. And the food grade lining is separated from the plastic. It looks disgusting.
Oh yeah.
And this Cornell guy is saying, right now we're looking at 6 months. It's just 6 months is the thing. We're trying to push it to 2 years. Doesn't that just in its own definition tell you how gross that is?
Yeah. I mean, I applaud the effort, because the vast majority of wine is consumed, as they say, whatever that number is. We always
24 months.
Around 98% of all wines are consumed within 48 hours of purchase, or whatever that is. So good, good on you. Go for it. Do some packaging that takes up less carbon and takes up less energy and all of that, and hopefully doesn't take up as much space in a landfill. But if you're going to make a wine to age, like you said, we're still told, don't presume that wine's going to be good 9 months from now.
Yeah, it's impossible. I just, it scares me that they're in the lab somewhere, manipulating plastics. And he was telling me they're epoxies, and there were some words he was using that kind of confounded me. That's the basis of the coating.
Yeah.
But I also understand, times are different, times have changed. And so my romantic view of wine, may not survive that, but I'll make you laugh. One of the women that came in here who's got a product in cans, I said, well, do you think Lafitte's going to get in a can one day? She says, absolutely. I'm like,
it's like someday being in 350 years.
Yeah, right. When there's no more glass.
Yeah.
I thought that was really hilarious. Would you recommend this path to your colleagues that are in the hospitality world, that are restaurateurs, that are working the line in the kitchen, and they want to learn about wine? Would you recommend the same path today?
I'm not sure I would. I think that, and I've said it all along throughout this process as I've taught and examined. I've said, look, don't do this because you think you're going to get the brass ring, because as I say, I got zero interest from anybody after I passed both exams, and it's very different today. But I also have to admit that the heyday for the Master Sommelier was probably 10 years ago. Right when the Somm movie came out, everybody got into that and people really talked about it. And there were a lot of people who found jobs because of that. But you're supposed to work where at a place that values you and you value it, and where it's a fascination for you. And that's been how it has been for me. I love the hell out of this. I'm having a great time. Nobody in their right mind should ever presume they're going to get rich in the wine business, because certainly as I told my business partner in the winery, it's like the only way you make a small fortune in the wine business is by beginning with a large one. You know the saying, and so you do it because you love it. And so you do the exams because you love that process and you want to be part of that process. Because you love that group of people and you want to hang out with those, like-minded souls. But if you think you're going to get a big fat paycheck at the end of it, I really do think those days have passed.
That's a really, really good point. And the passion has to drive you to it and get you through it, because it actually probably now is probably hard to motivate thinking that you're going to get a 6-digit job when you graduate, through all the work it takes to get it done. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I had an author in here. He wrote the book, I Drink and Know Things. It's a 52-week travel through the world of wine, and every week you taste something new on your own with this book. And I think he was on, either he failed out of the Master of Wine or he's still got like 1 or 2 tests left. He passed with Vanessa. He started with Vanessa Conlon, and she's obviously passed, but he's having a struggle with it. But he's written some books. I had another point that I wanted to make on that, but I don't remember what it was. We were talking. You said, well, I know what it was. The comment you made about making $1 million in the wine business, start with $1 billion. I've had 2 wonderful quotes about what I've done in my career. One was from Buddy Hackett.
Oh, nice.
And we were at a golf tournament. He was sitting at my table and he saw my sticker and it said Wine of the Month. He goes, Wine of the Month? I want to go to Miami. So, it's a corny joke, but it's from Buddy Hackett. So you got
it came from Buddy Hackett. Yeah. So come on.
And the other was I had Kevin O'Leary on the show, the famed Shark Tank guy, and he said the same thing you did. It's very hard. But then on the flip side, the winemaker for the basketball players, Yao Ming, when he first started in Napa, Hinman. Anyway, he says, I've been to the most amazing places in the world. I've eaten the most amazing food, drink the most amazing wine, and meet the most amazing people. I don't make that much money doing this, but man, that's not a bad way to hustle a lifestyle, right?
Oh, it's absolutely true. I often will use the Son House quote, the famous blues singer who said, I've never been a rich man, but I spent more money than a rich man ever had.
And I like that.
Yeah, that's the way it is in the wine business. You eat, drink, you eat and drink well. You're not taking a lot of money home, but that's okay. You're living good.
It's funny. When I sold the company, it was only been a few months. The guy bought all of my subscription wines, things that I paid $3.17 for, up to maybe $12, and wanted nothing of the stuff I collected during COVID, because during COVID, they bought anything I told them to.
Wow.
Nothing was off limits. And so I started collecting some Grand Crus and Premier Crus and some, exclusive Napa, and he wanted nothing of it. So actually my wife came, they just finished our sort of ad hoc cellar we're building in our kitchen that's going to hold about 2,000 bottles.
Right on.
That I get to enjoy. I guess you can say I could have gotten the cash if the guy wanted it, but all right, so I didn't get the cash. I got the wine. I'm happy with that.
Yeah. No, these days it's harder to find the wines.
So you said something funny, but it's not funny. But it is a question I had written down. You said, how incredibly stupid I was to start a winery. You're from Kansas, so how did you end up in Walla Walla? And then, what headwinds you were going to have. You studied it, and you still did it.
Yeah, no, that's certainly true. I think I saw that this was kind of the one and only chance. If I was ever going to do that, this is when I do it. And I wanted to have that experience. I wanted to be able to learn from that experience, and I've really enjoyed it. Even though my wife keeps saying, "Are you having fun?" I'm like, "What's fun about fighting Mother Nature?" It's like, no, fun is the wrong word, but I wouldn't not do it.
It's not like joining the high school football team. This is different.
Yeah. It's but it's certainly true that I actually still live in Kansas City, and I travel back and forth between Kansas City and Walla Walla. But I have a team there. There's a winemaker there. There's a general manager there. There's a winery that's almost done there. There's people to keep pushing the rock uphill. It happened really because it was kind of an accident. A friend of mine who used to work for me, he owns a small portion of a wine brand, and he tried to draw me in on that, and then that kind of fell apart. And one of the patriarchs of the Walla Walla wine industry is a wonderful man named Norm McKibben, who owns Pepper Bridge and Amavi and a bunch of different projects up there, who literally just called me up out of the clear blue and said, you got a raw deal. You should have been in on that deal. Why don't you come up here and take a look at some of my land and pick something out? And I was like, what, really? And I have one business partner who'd been chomping at the bit to do a project somewhere. Of course, he was looking at Napa, and I was like, you couldn't put a gun to my head and make me go to Napa. Those are not my style of wines. I had nothing against them, but they're not what I want to drink. And I've always said, this to my business partner, look, we better like the wines we make, because we may have to drink them all. So, it's like, and I knew I could go to Walla Walla and make a style of wine that I thought was valuable.
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily being made at that time. And so then it was okay. To me, it's like, yeah, I'm going to put really, if you will, my last big project. This is my last big project.
Well, congratulations. I think it's great. I love, it's entrepreneurial, and you already knew the headwinds. And I think choosing an area like Walla Walla, where you're going to get structure and you're going to get terroir and you're going to get things that separate the wines from others. And I think Washington's one of the great districts. So it's interesting, because I was speaking to your Master Somm colleagues, and they're trying to educate the American palate on Australian wines. And you've seen for sure the ebb and flow of Australian wines that have come to America. But one of my greatest recollections it's not the aha moment, but it is a moment where I can still taste the wine. It was probably 15 years ago, was this Riddoch Vineyards, I think is the Barossa Valley Cabernet. And I still taste it.
Oh yeah.
And your comment about Napa it's accurate. It's depressing a little bit, because it has the potential to produce some pretty interesting things if you let it. And we've unfortunately landed on a style that the consumer wants, and that's what's driving it.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, and nothing against it. I really do think that every a well executed style of wine will find its audience, and Napa has clearly found their audience. But the sad truth, of course, is that their audience is aging. It's aging out, really, and so there's if nothing else, the style of the wines that we're trying to make are lower in alcohol, The highest alcohol wine we've made was 14.2, and that was kind of a one-off. It's not like I have a particular number I'm going for.
Yeah, right.
It's more a matter of I grew up, or not grew up. I learned about wine drinking, European wines or California wines, including Napa wines from the 70s. And those wines typically weren't high in alcohol, and they feel better on my palate. So really, I feel like that's part of what other generations are demanding. They're saying, show us lower alcohol wines, show us less. They call them, of course, manipulated wines, and I think that's a bullshit term, really.
Yeah.
It's just that they're no longer impressed by a lot of oak, a lot of alcohol, a lot of extract. They want wines that have a little more charm and elegance to them, or at least that's what I'm hoping they want.
It's funny, you jogged a thought, and you're talking about Manny Camigi, and he was up at Daryl Cordy's place. This is years ago, and Daryl opens an Armenian wine, which is my heritage, and Emmanuel says, "Oh, now not only do I need to learn about them as a master sommelier, this is my curiosity. I got to compete against them,
Right.
because they're coming online."
Yeah.
Where do you think Walla Walla? Washington wines have been around forever. I've never seen them really ebb around here. And I always consider my Tuesdays tasting in 35 years of virtually every Tuesday sort of a litmus test of what's going on in the industry. But where do you think Walla Walla or the Washington wine scene sits in its what's the word, timeline?
Yeah, well, it's possible, I think, and not an exaggeration to say that there's something of an inflection point happening right now. And that's to say Chateau Ste. Michelle, which was the stand-in for Washington wines, even though I'm sure 98% of the people buying Ste. Michelle wines had no idea the wines were from Washington. But nonetheless, that's what people thought of when they thought of Washington wine. And now Ste. Michelle has been bought by a venture capital group, and they've withdrawn from almost half of their contracts. Their numbers are way down. They've been selling off contracts, selling off wine, picking up on contracts, and I think that it's a moment in which the Washington wine industry has an opportunity to redefine itself, and there's a whole bunch of little guys like me who are super excited about that because land is still affordable there. I can, that's really, if you will, one of the reasons I went to Walla Walla is because I could afford the damn land. And we have a chance, I think, to do something really interesting, make wines of our own style and get out from under Ste. Michelle's shadow, even though the next 2 or 3 years, I'm sure will be painful for a lot of growers. And just like, as you said early on, it's happening around the world where people are grubbing up vines and realizing that we've overplanted. That's going to happen in Washington as well, just like it's happening worldwide. And so there's pain to come. But I honestly think that we're in a place where we get to redefine ourselves, and that hardly ever happens. You're not going to ever see, or at least in our lifetimes, Napa will never be able to redefine itself. But
there are some burgeoning brands like Charles Smith has raised some popularity. I think Charles Bueller too. It's there's seems to be activity, and that's prominently Washington on the label that's where it's from. So, and it does. I mean, some of the complexity and the structure of the wines from those various appellations in Washington are fabulous. If you're seeking those things, right? And it's an interesting point you make because wine's agricultural, and I mean, you're a farmer now. Guess what? You went from Kansas City, now you're a farmer. So, right. I guess Kansas has farms too, right? But people look at it as a romantic. I've got a brand. I've got this big chateau in Napa, and then they realize, oh, I'm really a farmer, and it's really hard to make a buck in this business, and so the passion sort of wanes from that. But at the flip side, my company existed because agriculture is not a specific science, and you always overproduce. Or if you do produce it, you don't know what to do with it once you make it. So you got to sell it somewhere, and you put it in the open market and sell the juice and whatever. And we survived on these, on this concept. So,
well, you had the connections to do so, and that's certainly what it comes to.
That took time.
Somebody who knows what's going on, can spot the trends, and then has the connections to take, to act upon it.
So do you have a direct to consumer program at Echo Lands?
Yeah, like everybody else, we have a wine club. We certainly are just about done building a winery that we believe will draw a lot of people there because, for whatever reason, it seems that wine clubs only prosper when people go to the winery, visit, and say, "I want to be a member of this club." We opened our doors, or I should say, the first wine we made came online March of 2020. How's my timing? It's like, we couldn't start a winery or couldn't start a
And you didn't have a website yet, so
yeah,
that's
yeah. Oh, it was like, holy shit. But nonetheless, we weathered that and now we have what really will be, at least for a time, this incredible facility that's going to draw people to it. And so we're gonna be the shiny object for a while, and we have to make those relationships, create relationships with the people who show up there. Because I still live in the world. I had this argument with a guy who visited not too long ago as a retailer in Seattle, and he was just like, "You're talking about selling one bottle at a time. I'm talking about selling cases at a time." And I said, "Well, I'm not. I'm never going to talk about that because that's not the business I want to be in. I've been in that business. I was a wholesaler for 15 years, and
Yeah.
and what I love is the one bottle at a time business. That's
Yeah.
really fun. And so that's what we have to do. And to your point, we've got to develop direct to consumer, but based on that relationship that we're going to send you 6 bottles, not 6 cases.
Well, you know how experiential wine is, and that's so. What the mistake you don't want to make is that you've got this person that's raised their hand, that's shown up at your winery, or that's gone to your website and said, "Yeah, I'm not just a prospect anymore. I'm a suspect for a sale," and you let it go. And so
Yeah.
I'm teaching my young niece who wants to sell salad dressing, and she's showed me her website. I go, "Where's your email collection?" I mean, if somebody has gone to your site and they've raised their hands effectively to say, "Hey, I'm interested to see what you have," and you let them get off the site without an email address,
Oh,
or you
wow.
let them into your
Yeah.
tasting room without asking for, "Why don't you join the club?" Because every time, here's the difference between what your club could have been or can be and what I just got out of. And I think the sales in general wine clubs, other than winery ones, have suffered through post-COVID because of this concept. And that is, every time somebody opens your bottle of wine after they join the club, goes back to that day that they stood there with Doug Frost and tasted wine. That's just what happens. It's
Right.
like the most obvious thing that happens in my career is people go to Europe and then they text me pictures of the wine they're drinking. I'm like, first of all, aren't you on vacation? Why you send me
Right.
pictures?
You have something better to do.
Then your wife is sitting there, your husband. Anyway, and I get them the wine, same vintage, whatever it is. Let's say they're sitting in front of the Parthenon and they're having the house wine, and I'm able to get it.
Yeah.
They invariably will tell you it doesn't taste the same.
Oh, I know. That's so true. Yeah.
And it's because you're not,
Absolutely.
the kids are pulling on your shirt tails. They want to go to school. You got to make lunch. Whatever's going on in your life is not sitting in front of the Parthenon with your best pizza you've ever had.
Not that experience any longer.
Yeah. And I think what you're doing when you do that in the winery, it's so important. And I was going through my dad's effects, and I found the document that he transferred to me when I bought the company, which had the financials and stuff, but it had, here's your competition. This is 1988. If you imagine, there was only maybe 6 wineries in Napa that had clubs, and it was like Inglenook, Mondavi, just the main basic ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're going to skip the wholesale. You're a wholesaler. You're going to skip all those margins, and go right to retail.
Exactly.
And they're glad to do it
Hell yes.
because you showed them something. You showed them something cool. I think that's incredible, and I think that's the survival of. Well, when we were going to Napa in February of 20, and I had a meeting with Sarah Clearman of the Napa Valley Register, and I thought she was going to write this glowing article about the guy that's been doing this the longest, and no, it had nothing to do with what she wanted from me. They knew COVID was coming, and she was trying to figure out from a direct to consumer standpoint, how are these small wineries going to get through this when they don't have, e-commerce presence?
Right. Well, and that's it, and that's how people got through. And those that had an e-commerce platform and had developed a strong base, they were fine. And those of us who were just getting started, well, we had, one hand, if not both hands, tied behind our backs.
Yeah,
But
right.
we figured it out. We got through it. It was just again, make sure that when somebody visits your site, you create a relationship with them.
Yep.
You don't just, put some pictures up and hope they'll buy wine.
Yeah, well, at least you weren't 80%, on premise, and we're counting on those sales to pay the bill.
Oh yeah. No, it really was funny because that was the idea. I have all these, because of my background in the sommelier world, have all these relationships in restaurants. I was like, we're going to focus on the restaurant business. That's really where the keys are. And it's like, good luck on that.
Yeah, so many distributors, wholesalers came out of COVID saying, we got to start DTC. We got to start DTC.
Oh yeah.
And it's way less aligned with their model than a winery's model would be. I mean, being a wholesaler and trying to sell DTC is like two completely different things. There's no way you can bite that off.
Correct.
So when you're a wholesaler, we're almost done. It's unbelievable already. It's 50 minutes, but you did it for 15 years.
Yes.
What was interesting during COVID is when that 80% of the business was gone. I mean, I had Camus show up here.
Oh,
Can
I
you
know.
help us?
You could get anything for a time. You really could.
And I'm like, you never came here before.
Exactly. How come I'm important today?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it was really funny. All of a sudden, you want to cost?
What years were you? Yeah. What years were you a wholesaler?
So I started wholesaling in 1981 and did that until 96. So I actually got my, finished those exams while I was being a wholesaler.
Let's touch on that just for a second before we get off. Huge consolidations in LA. The small importers are gone. Is that like that in the Midwest where you still have a plethora of small guys that are bringing in interesting things, or are they sort of consolidating under Southern and RNDC and stuff?
It's actually, things are, I think, better than we often admit they are. There's that ebb and flow. Guys get gobbled up, and then more new guys get spewed out, or more guys get angry at what's going on at Southern RNDC or Breakthrough, what have you, and so they start their own thing, and so it's a constant ebb and flow for me. It's funny. I do think, when you look at the retail side, that's where it really feels constricted. That the big box stores, they're buying from 2-3 guys, and that's it. And I don't, I worry about where that's going to go, but I think wineries have to make their own way. And because the big wholesalers, there's no way a big wholesaler can give a damn about me unless they have some small division, which I'm playing around. I'm in with Southern in New York and Florida, because those are big markets, and because they're working with these little tiny divisions that I know people there. And it's almost like an experiment that I know is going to go bad at some point. They've taken care of me so far, but in most markets, I'm with little guys.
I think first of all, you should always test anyway, whether you're testing, an ad on social networking or testing how you're distributing your wines. I think you want to maximize the value. But what's happening in LA, the books are so big now that you can't get any traction.
Right.
And what's different than the old days, and probably even when you were around, is you were sort of a brand builder as a wholesaler.
You could talk about that.
Yeah. Now, Southern's not going to build a brand for you. You got to help them build the brand. They just want to deliver it for you. That's basically, I'm going to get a book here.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right on that. You really are. I mean, that's just how it is now. Brand building does not happen in a wholesale operation.
No, it's just the way it is. All right, we're going to wrap this up. It's already 52 minutes. It's been a fabulous conversation. I know we can do it again and still keep talking, but since you're as educated as you are, then, and I usually say this only for French people, but, and I had Arthur de Longchamp in today, whose grandmother, is the Comtesse de Lalonde, the Pichon.
Yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable conversation. But I have to tell you this story just because you're in the wine trade. My dad took us to Vin Expo in 1993.
Oh,
and
cool.
I was young to the industry. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know where I was. I was in Pauillac. We were at Chateau Belgrave. Henry van der Voort, who used to own.
I remember. I used to buy wines from Henry.
You're kidding.
No, I got stories about him. I got
He's
one
fabulous.
story in particular. He was fantastic. Henry was great.
he taught me a very solid lesson that I've used many times. And I was a young punk, and so he wanted to sell me his Li Puyi, a Chinese vintage, Chinese food, and I didn't return the call. And he finally called my dad, and they spoke French. I speak French, and so he says in French, he says, the courtesy from your son, the courtesy of a response. Right. And I've used that so many times in my career, not against somebody, but tell them, look, just the courtesy of a response.
Exactly. Just be polite. If
that's all there is.
Be polite. Yeah.
So Henri takes us to his Chateau Belgrave Vandervoort that we were across the street from the Longueville, and he goes, "We're going to go to dinner." And so my mom and dad, my wife and I, would go to dinner across the way, and we're at now Pichon Lalonde, and there's this elegant woman. She's wearing a white dress, eyelet thing. She's probably in her 60s. Henry's in his probably early 70s, and we have a nice dinner. I have no idea where I'm at. I'm reading. And this is 93. So about 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, I'm reading Wine and War from the Cladstrups.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. I remember the book. Sure.
And they're talking about May Hélène Langsong. She is the Comtesse. She was there when the Germans came in, shot up the paintings, and left their tar, on the floor and the Oriental rugs, Persian rugs. Well, this is Arthur's grandmother.
Wow.
And so I woke up literally, Doug, about, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago. I woke up, I must have been dreaming or something. And I go, holy shit. I had dinner with this woman.
Right.
And I called the Cladstrups, they live in Paris. I said, I'm reading your book and I realized I had dinner with this woman. I feel like I'm part of the history. We only met and we talked. I didn't even know if I spoke with her, but because of Henry's relationship, and apparently his rep at the time was Alain Rivière, who now is with Escalon.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so I emailed him. I said, Alain, do you remember this trip? He goes, yeah. I said, was that May Alain Langsong? He goes, yeah, that's who that was. He was like Henry's little girlfriend. I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, I don't want to bore you with my story. Anyway, this is the book. It's called Wine is the Best Medicine. It's by Dr. Maury, who was an MD in France. He was also a homeopathic doctor, and he wrote a book on the various ailments, human ailments, and what French wine would be symptomatically relieve your problem and or maybe even cure it. So it's things like allergies, anemia, and the answer. The reason I asked this question is for fun. I think I'm around about 33% right answer, so right along, a random sampling of I'll give you 3 choices.
Okay,
but it's kind of like I'm going to give you the disease. I'm going to give you 3 choices of wine, and it's more like, okay, why did you choose that answer, right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So we're going to go with a fever, and if you have a fever, according to Dr. Murray, and we're also going to go with the dosage on this.
Okay.
You could have a Grave, you could have a dry champagne, or you could have a Côte de Beaune. One of those 3 will help you with your fever.
Well, I'm gonna have to, and I assume it's Grave Rouge, not Grave Blanc.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with the Côte de Beaune. I'm just trying to imagine, that the world of wine and medicine goes back centuries, and I'm just imagining that because you have a fever, you need something from the earth. You need something earthy to help ground you and bring that fever, that temperature down. If you have something higher in alcohol, like Grave, it's going to be higher in alcohol than a Pinot Noir would be. So that wouldn't work for you. It's going to elevate your alcohol and to excite the blood as champagne is supposed to do. And again, I think that's probably kind of bogus, but that's its that's its
That's a fascinating analysis. Probably the most thoughtful one I've ever had.
Well, it's fun. It's a fun game to play.
And you know that I think Louis XV, or one of the Louis, they've credited the curing of a disease. I think it was a Gevrey Chambertin or something.
Oh, really?
He drank, and they say it cured him. But unfortunately, that was the wrong answer.
Okay.
The answer was the dry champagne. But maybe we'll get the dosage right. So the answer was dry champagne. Here's what it says. Why? Because these wines contain, among other things, 2 important elements for a feverish person: phosphorus, which is eminently stimulating, and sulfur in its eminently stimulating, and there's sulfur in its sulfate of potassium form, which is detoxifying. All right,
Interesting.
so
Okay.
that's his analysis. But there's a dosage that goes with this, and I think the Tétangers would be very happy to hear this. So what do you think? How much of that champagne should you have a day?
Apparently, you're supposed to drink a bottle.
That's exactly right. See, you're good. You got And so maybe it didn't cure you, but you sure feel better when you're done with it.
Damn straight. Why stop there?
Exactly. It's been a pleasure, Doug. I hope we can do it again.
Well, thanks, Paul. No, it's absolutely been a pleasure. And we'll have to exchange Henry Vandervoort stories. I one in particular.
Love to do it. And maybe we'll do it over a barbecue in Kansas one day.
There you go.
Thank you for listening to Wine Talks with Paul Kalamkarian. Don't forget to subscribe because there's more great interviews on their way. Folks, have a great time out there in the wine world. Cheers.